I was having one of my standard bitchy blow-ups and, pouting and fighting and yelling. And I just said, well, I'm leaving. And if you want me to come back, call me. And then I didn't get a phone call.
It felt so dark between the both of us at that time.
For some reason, there's a compulsion to demonize one or both of the partners when a relationship ends.
It's very hard in any coaching capacity to work with a man who has a victim mindset.
When I try to make suggestions of how to maintain intimacy or connection, it's what I see is a lot of really hurt men online.
I hear this almost every day. It's like, well, you don't know my wife. She's never taken accountability for anything.
Like, yes, there's accountability, like I'm in charge of my feelings, but I'm not really. I'm in charge of how I express. I can't control what it is I'm feeling in any given moment.
Matt, Whitney, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited. We were supposed to do something in Florida and then schedules didn't align, and this is actually beautiful because now I get both of you.
Yeah, it's nice and close to home for us too, so perfect.
Yeah. So I want to get back into like the origin story of all of this couples work that you're doing and the men's work specifically that you're doing. And what I was saying in the car ride over that I think is so important is that we want everything to fit nicely into one bucket, right? We want to pretend that everything is like this or that, or like everything's kind of really polarized right now. So it's either you stay in a marriage, whether you're happy or not, and that's the only right thing to do. Or then there's this like divorce and go find yourself and be free. And you're like, well, you actually had this whole messy middle story and then came back together. And I don't see anyone talking about that. So I would love to get into like what got you into this work and kind of like your story as a couple.
Yeah, I'll get us going. You can kind of fill in the details as you see fit. But basically, we were in a rough marriage for a long time, and we did like all the stuff that you'd normally do, right? We went to couples therapy and we read the books, and really what it came down to is I felt like I was in a position where I'm like, hey, I'm doing all these things, I'm doing all the work. You said you wanted more help around the house. I'm doing more of this around the house, and like I'm not getting anything I need. Mm-hmm. And that's because you're unappreciative and you're a bad word and, you don't work in a marriage. And I think Whitney was kind of going through her own thing where she was giving a lot of herself and not getting what she needs. And I'm sure we'll get into that, but it got us to a place where both of us were like, well, why are we doing this? And I was still like, I don't care. Like, we're just going to make it work. And Whitney was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't feel the way I felt. And yeah, we thought we had tried everything, and we, as far as we knew at the time, we had tried everything, and we were like, okay, you know what? Like, as much as this hurts, we're obviously not compatible as a couple. Like, this clearly just doesn't work. And I was having one of my standard bitchy blow-ups and pouting and fighting and yelling, and I just said, well, I'm leaving, and if you want me to come back, call me. And then I didn't get a phone call. So that was kind of that. And then we were separated for like 6 months, and standard male female separation. I was like a mess trying to get by and lonely and depressed. And Whitney was going through her own stuff too. Don't get me wrong. But on the outside, it was like, oh, Whitney's doing great. And she looks like she's happy. And then, yeah, anything you want to add to that, or want me to keep going?
No, that's pretty much sums it up. I just want to say ahead of time that I just got braces behind my teeth, so I will sound a little bit
She's lying.
Funny.
This is how she always sounds.
So just wanted to start with that.
Yeah. So after that, like 6 months, I was going through like a major period of introspection, and I was like, okay, well, I got to put my life back together. So I started working on me and like taking ownership and being responsible and saying, well, instead of Whitney being the problem, like, what if I was the problem? Like, let's just play around with that idea. And I realized that, not that I was to blame for everything by any means, we both had our problems, and Whitney's very, very open about her problems in the relationship. But there was a lot that I was doing that I shouldn't do, and a lot that I wasn't doing that I should do. And I went to Whitney one day, convinced her. We'd really barely spoken. Like we passed off the kids, and we would talk about, finances and stuff, but we didn't talk about our relationship at all. And cause it was over. Like we both knew it was over. And, I was like, hey, I want to give this another shot. And we went away to Fino on Vancouver Island. And I just said, hey, look, like I've learned some things. I got I got stuff I got to work on. And really the takeaway of the week was like, hey, like I get it. Like I actually understand why you felt the way that you felt, and I don't blame you for that anymore. And so wherever we go from here, like I want you to know that. And yeah, and then we started working on it, and there was so many things that I learned during that time apart and during the time when we were working on the relationship in the first year that we were back together, where I kind of realized like nobody gives men an understanding of what marriage actually is, like what your role is as a man, what her role is as a woman, how to make that work for the two of you because everybody's different, and what emotional safety means for women, what respect means for men, like where you need to lead, where you need to create safety. And I had been taught none of that. And I thought that was just such a disaster that I'd had to kind of figure this all out on my own, and none of the books and none of the couples therapists, like none of it helped. And so the only thing going well in my life at that time was like my business, but Whitney and I decided through a lot of dialogue that we'd finally built this business over 10 years in finance, and we're like, we're going to sell that. We're going to move to Texas, and we're going to, as an introvert, get on Instagram and start talking about how, hey, you can actually do something to save your marriage, men. Here's what actually works when all of the standard advice about like active listening, we don't even know what that is, right? All the standard advice isn't working. And so that's my version of the origin story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's the story.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, or do you think I kind of covered that?
No, I mean, yeah, it was a really, really deep struggle. I felt really lost, and just like, I think we were both equally shells of ourselves. Like we weren't showing up as the versions that we knew we could be. And it felt like we were getting worse together. Like the more time we were spending together, the worst versions were coming out of one another, So it felt so toxic. It felt so suffocating. And we were both just really, really, really in pain. And so it felt like I thought in my head, I was like, we're both going to be so much happier if we're apart, because we have these beautiful children. We can raise them together, but separately, and we're both going to I'm like, he doesn't know it yet, but he's going to be so much happier. He's going to move on. He's going to find the woman of his dreams, the woman that is going to love him the way he deserves to be loved, and that the kind of woman he really wants. And he's going to thank me one day. And I'm not trying to make myself sound like I'm some virtuous, I was doing it all for him. Like, no,
that's love though. Yeah. That is love.
Right. And I did love him. I loved him through the whole time. The love never went away, but I also wanted more for myself. Right. I also didn't like who I was turning into. And I guess that, we're all capable. We all have these different sides, right? And we can go into our darkness, or we can go into our light. And it felt so dark between the both of us at that time.
And
yeah.
No, I was going to say, I think the beautiful thing about that, it's for some reason there's a compulsion to demonize one or both of the partners when a relationship ends, instead of just saying I can love you and I can truly want what's best for you and what's best for me. And even if that's not us together, I don't think we throw around these labels like he was a narcissist, she had borderline. Yeah. And it's like, what are you trying to accomplish with that? You can admit that the relationship isn't working or that you're no longer a good fit and not demonize each other. So I would love to see more people that when they are uncoupling, to do it a little bit more with grace and love. And the way that I've read about separating, especially if you've been together for a long time, where you're dissolving a marriage, is it should feel like a grief. You should be grieving for that person and that relationship because it was so beautiful, not leaving from this point of anger and aggression. Because if you're there, you need to recalibrate before you can make a big decision. Because right now, if you're leaving with that much animosity, then it's an emotional decision instead of maybe one that's in alignment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anger also when I'm working with clients, because we work mostly with men, right? Whitney has some female clients, but the bulk of our program is working with men. And let's say their wives have left or they're separated, which is, half the guys that we work with are already separated. One of the best signs is if she's still angry, because usually that anger means I still want something from you and you're not giving it to me, and I'm really angry about it. And so if there is that kind of anger and tension still in the relationship, part of you has not actually decided to move on, right? It's usually a much worse sign for the relationship if where she's at, because I'm working with men who are trying to save the relationship. If where she says like, hey, no, like I really love you. You're an amazing person. This is just not where I am anymore. Like that's where it's actually more difficult. So yeah, that anger is a sign that you haven't fully moved on. You don't want to move on. There's still a lot of unresolved needs and wants, and you're making kind of a reactive decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you mentioned in both of your stories that there were things that you were doing that you shouldn't have been and things that you were doing that you shouldn't have been. Can you kind of lay out a lot of the common, I guess, male practices that you see with couples? Because when I try to make suggestions of how to maintain intimacy or connection, it's what I see is a lot of really hurt men online. And even in like some of your comment sections where they immediately go after you and they're like, well, is she being accountable? What about her? What about her? And I was like, you need to step into your manhood right now, because what you're complaining and whining, and that's going to just like push her away further. So like, how can I step into my masculinity and like take accountability? And then it's almost like leading. Like if you want to be the leader of the family, like you kind of have to step into that first, and then she will soften and follow.
Yeah, that's really brilliantly said.
100%.
Yeah, and long before I was doing any kind of relationship coaching, because I kind of fell into this. Like that was I thought at some point that I was going to be into more like just working with men on who they are as men, and the relationship was kind of take care of itself. But it's very hard in any coaching capacity to work with a man who has a victim mindset. If somebody wants to change, you can help them make that change pretty easily. If somebody's really committed to, this is not my fault, poor me, the world is against me, there's almost nothing you can do to help them, because even if, you can yell at them until they work out, like as soon as you stop yelling at them, they're going to stop working out. And that's very true in relationships. If you want her to take accountability, you can try to pressure her into that. But women, especially from an unsafe man, they don't like pressure. They don't like, hey, it's your fault, it's all on you. Like that's not what they want to feel in a relationship with a man. If you want her to take accountability, there's one effective way to do that. It's like get radically accountable yourself, and set that tone in the relationship. Hey, like, our family is a kingdom, and the rules of this kingdom are we own our shit. And I'm going to show you that. And maybe I have to show you that for 6 months, because I've been doing the opposite for the last 10 years. So maybe for 6 months, I'm going to take accountability for everything I can take accountability for all the time, no exceptions. And in my experience with 80% of the clients I work with, their wives take a while to get used to that. And they're like, no, the pattern in our relationship is we blame each other. So they stay there. But after he's in this new pattern for a while, they go, oh, this actually is way better. And I've seen the way that you're leading in the relationship and why you own your role in things. Well, I guess that's the new way that we do things here. Okay, that actually gives me permission to start owning my stuff and saying, hey, I have to apologize for something. And the first time that happens with the guys, they're blown away, because most of the guys join the program, and we laugh about this because I hear this almost every day. It's like, well, you don't know my wife. She'll never do that. She's never taken accountability for anything. She doesn't, she never shows appreciation for anything. And you have to kind of unpack with these guys. Well, hey, you want to be the leader. You want to be respected. You want her to feel safe with you. You want her to be feminine around you. It's like, okay, well, do the work. Like you start showing that this is the new pattern in our family. And if it's a better pattern, she's probably going to be thrilled to adapt to that pattern and say, oh, this is way better. Happy to do this.
She will follow. Like the thing is, when I watched Matt, and I'm going to use like an analogy here, like ascend that mountain, like become this great, in my opinion, great man with this king energy who was taking ownership and accountability and really leading our family. I didn't want to be left behind. Like I watched him become this version of himself that I always knew he had so much potential, and that I believed he was already like an amazing man, but I didn't know how incredible he could become. And watching that, I was like, wow, like I want to be there with him. I don't want to be stuck in my own, pardon my French, in my own shit, right? I want to get there too. And eventually I did start taking accountability and apologizing and showing up in all the ways that he was doing. And if you want to be the masculine leader, regardless of your gender, you have to take that first step. Like if you're a woman and you want to be masculine, you want to lead and be in charge, then okay, then let's put it on the woman.
Yeah, go do that.
Mm-hmm. But if you're a man and you want to lead, you want to be the captain of your proverbial ship, like you own that ship. And then the crew, I know it's going to sound maybe degrading to some, but the crew will fall in line. And I don't have any shame in saying that, because I love that I get to feel that I got to fall in line, quote unquote, because I feel so safe on the ship that he's leading now. Like I can rest, I can relax, and I don't have to step into my masculine and take charge of anything anymore. I mean, I take charge of the things in our life that are mine, that are my responsibility. But in the image of our relationship, like he leads and I follow, but I want to. It's a choice. It's not because he's making me. And you didn't
always
follow.
Want to, right?
No, and I didn't. Yeah, I was very masculine.
And I was always like, well, that's because Whitney doesn't understand what's healthy. She doesn't get it. And I was so certain that like it was her. And looking back, like it was not hers. Like I was showing up in a way where it's like, well, no, like I wasn't following myself. I would say I'm going to go, whatever, I'm going to go to the gym, and then I wouldn't. Right? I'd say I'm going to get our finances in order, and then I wouldn't. I'm going to take care of the kids or make sure the kitchen's clean, and then I wouldn't. It's like, well, I wasn't following myself, but I still expected her to follow me. And like, oh, surprise, she didn't like that deal. Right? And so, yeah, both of like, it was, again, me leading, kind of like me looking at everything that I needed to look at. And then Whitney after that, and largely as a result of that, she's like, oh, I feel safe enough to look at me. Like I know Matt thinks it's good to own things, so I can do that now. And I'm not going to get punished by him because he doesn't berate me like he used to, or yell like he used to, or make me feel unsafe. And so I can now relax into myself enough to actually get in touch with what I'm really feeling, which is like, oh yeah, hey, I kind of feel guilty about some of these things. And it's just been this.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's destabilizing to like look at yourself sometimes, like looking in the mirror and realizing that you were not always a good person. Like that I've, behaved in ways that were beyond inappropriate, that were unkind. But when wanting to look at myself as a kind person, believing I'm a kind person, but then having to reconcile that I do unkind things, like it was really difficult. And so, but when I knew that I had Matt to rely on, like he was going to love me no matter what and support me no matter what. And like, it was okay. Like, he's like, hey babe, like I lived that with you. Like, I know that version of you. I was married to her before, remember? It's okay. And I was like, okay, yeah, it is okay. And then eventually I was able to, find self-acceptance, and I no longer needed to like lean on him for all of that per se. But, in the beginning I definitely did, because it was quite, unnerving to admit certain things to myself.
Yeah. And that part's never easy at all. And I think when we were talking about it in the car, like no one leaves any relationship unscathed, especially marriage. You're playing at like an expert level once you decide to, create a life with somebody. And I see what I think some people are going to say in the comments or when they see some of these clips is they will see all of the effort and what is required to maintain a long-term relationship, let alone like we haven't even gotten into kids yet. And they're like, well, why do I do it? So like, why as a man, why am I signing up for marriage? Or why am I signing up for a long-term relationship if it requires all of this work?
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough question to answer, because like it's, the default answer is like, oh, because everything, like you get so much out of it. But when you're in that mindset where what matters to me is like, well, I've got a great life and I don't have to listen to complaining, and I get to go to the gym when I want, and I get to go out when I want. The real answer is that there is a much deeper meaning and a much deeper fulfillment in serving those that you love. And if you want your life to be sort of hedonic and doing the things that feel good and just maximizing your own personal pleasure, like you can pursue that path. But I know a lot of guys who've pursued that path till they're 50, 60 years old. And, if they've got money, there's no shortage of 23-year-olds that are willing to sleep with them, but they're not happy. There's a way deeper level of contentment knowing that when I go, do whatever I do, when I go to the gym, when I go work, when I bring home a paycheck, it's like, I get to share this with people that really, really deeply matter to me. And I get to experience the gratitude that they have for me. And I get to see my kids thriving. I get to see my wife thriving. Everything we have in our life, like if I was alone, I'd be very happy to live in a cabin in the woods with 5 dogs. Like on some of like, why do I want anything if it's just for me? Like I'd be like, again, I'll go read poetry, whatever. But it makes everything in your life more worthwhile. It makes everything more meaningful. It makes everything that hurts and the times that suck and the sacrifice, it makes it all better, because you're like, I'm doing this for something more than me. Like I love my wife and my children way more than I love myself. And if you've never experienced that, if you've only ever been in relationships where, you're kind of trying to figure out, do I get this out of that? Or do I get, it's very difficult to explain how much better it feels to open your eyes in the morning when you're in that kind of serving relationship. And I don't think you can know what that is until you've experienced it. But I get where those guys are coming from too, because legally the system is completely stacked against men. The dating culture is amazing for 4% of men. And it's okay for 16%, and it's absolutely horrible for 80% of men. Like, the odds are stacked against men right now. But I mean, what do you want to, it's like saying, well, I'm not going to go to the gym because it's tough to build muscle. It's like, okay, well, if you're okay not having muscle, then good decision. But if you want more, it's like, it's going to take work. It's going to take suffering. You're going to have to go when you're tired. And if you choose to forego all of that meaning because poor me, the deck is stacked against me, it's like, well, practice that attitude in your career, see where it gets you. Practice that attitude in your health, see where it gets you. If you want the absolute most you can get out of life, it doesn't really matter if the deck is stacked against you. Like, figure out a way. And, there's a lot of guys like me, a lot of companies like mine that are bringing these like kind of these old ideas, but that are new to us as a culture back into the world. It's like, hey, go find some information about how you can actually create a healthy relationship. Because I promise you, if you've had 10 toxic relationships in a row, it's not all them, right? It's you. And if you fix yourself, you'll be amazed how quickly you attract somebody different into your life. I can't tell you the number of clients where we have like an 80% success rate in our program, and the 20% of them where it doesn't work out, it's amazing how quickly they find a new, wonderful, amazing relationship, because they're not the same person anymore. They're attracting somebody very different. So what I think those men really need to understand, and the bitter men brigade, right, with all the negative comments and all women suck and I'm happier alone. It's like, that's just a victim mindset. And it feels really good to be a victim. It feels really good to say, this is not my fault. I'm good as I am. But the thing is, if you're good as you are, you don't improve. And like, take that ownership and just say, hey, this is going to be really hard. The deck is stacked against me. Maybe I'm really bad at picking up women, or I've chose a string of really unhealthy women, but if I apply myself to this, I could get somewhere better than I am now. And the only way that's going to happen is if you decide that you're going to focus primarily on you as what needs to be worked on, and not all women.
Mm-hmm. And to answer that question from the other side that you would never admit to or say, but you're a very worshipped man at home. Like, you're worshipped by your children. You're admired by me, and I don't know if I say worship. Like, it is.
I like that word. You can say that,
you are.
As I'm concerned.
Yeah, that word sounds
you are.
hot.
You are. Yeah. Okay, I worship you. Like, and that is because of everything you just said. Like, all the effort and energy and all the things you put into our relationship and into our family. You've created an incredibly grateful woman who, like, I want to practice every day to be sorry.
I knew it was coming.
I always get emotional when we talk about this stuff. Yeah. Cause I find, because this is just like, it's life changing, going from where we were to where we are over the last several years. It's life changing. And, I definitely, I practice every day to be, a woman worthy of you. So.
Yeah. And I've worked very, very hard to be a man worthy of you. And yeah, you're very cute.
Sorry.
There's. I'll just talk. I'll just talk through it.
Don't apologize. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I just I feel like one day I should stop getting emotional about this stuff.
No, it's obviously like, you guys are doing something really impactful. And I truly love all of the work that you're doing, and you are changing people's lives, and you're like leading by example. So many people in any space online, when you're front facing, and it's like this facade, it's this kind of like LARPing that I see everyone doing. Right. Yeah. And especially in like the male space, it's, like, this is masculinity, and this is how you become a Cobra King, or whatever that trash is. And it's like, no, like, you guys are like real people, and you have a family, and you, like, it's not this perfect thing, right? It's not like this woman who's like out there divorcing, living her best life, and this, or like a trad woman that's like, you stay no matter what. It's like, no, we're human, we're flawed. The relationship gets messy, and we almost divorced, and we found each other. I think it's a beautiful love story, and it helps a ton of people.
Thank you.
I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Candice.
Yeah, it's very, very meaningful, and it's like very close to our hearts, because like we've been in that place where like everything kind of sucks and you see no way out. And then we've been in the place where it's like, oh, we can actually make this work. And like, yeah, the more people we can share that with, yeah, I mean, it's so close to both of our hearts.
So one thing that I see a lot in this space, because my audience is heavily male, it's probably about 70% male, 30% female, is these men say that they are doing all of the things. Like they will take my advice and they will start helping out around the house. They'll start participating more with the child's care. They'll try to do little touches, and they're like, it doesn't work. Because like that's kind of where I say to start, right? Is like follow through, be a man of your word, follow through, be disciplined. If you say you're going to do something, execute on that thing, because that translates to safety for a lot of women. They don't get it. Like at first I got inundated with these guys. I'm like, how is not taking out the trash making you unsafe? You're neurotic. I was like, no, like our brain doesn't distinguish between like over-stressed, chronic stress, acute stress, or I'm getting chased by a tiger. Like it just hasn't caught up. So it absolutely does translate to her in that way. So maybe it's time, maybe it's like they're just in the beginning of it and she hasn't had enough time to reacclimate to have that appreciation. But like where, like, do you get that same complaint? Like I'm doing all the things and she doesn't show appreciation. I would love both of your insight. It's like, why is that happening?
So that's 100% of my clients. And the thing is, like, they actually are doing a lot of the things. And like, if you put down everything they do in a week on an Excel spreadsheet, be like, oh, holy shit, why isn't she happy? But the thing that guys don't understand is she has to be in a good emotional place. She has to be feeling safe in the relationship for any of that to even register. Because if she thinks that you don't really love her, you don't really get her, you don't really see her, she doesn't feel safe around you, taking out the trash doesn't register as an act of service, right? And men in so many ways can pour from an empty cup, right? And I think that's largely a testosterone thing. Like testosterone is driven at results, right? So it's like, if I roll my ankle, but I still got to, go bring home a deer to the cave, like I'm going to figure out a way to do it. Estrogen is much more driven at social connection and social well-being, emotional well-being. And so if she's not in a good place of emotional well-being herself, if her cup is empty, she can't pour out of that cup. And so what men really need to understand is she has to have that emotional safety piece in place. And emotional safety is its own thing, but it also breaks down into 3 categories. So feeling supported, feeling special, and feeling, what's the other one?
Safe?
No, safe, seen, special, supported. Yeah, supported, safe, seen, special, supported. Seen, seen.
Okay.
A woman has to, in order to feel safe, she has to be seen, she has to feel special, and she has to feel supported. And if those pieces are missing, it doesn't matter how much work you do, it's not going to register with her. And she's just going to look at you as like an employee who's simping for attention all the time. But if you can put those pieces in place where she feels totally seen, she goes, oh, wow, he knows what I need. He's taking out the garbage because he understands I had a hard day at work and the kids are off the wall and my cousin's uncle's friend's daughter is in the hospital and that's on my mind. And he wants to take out the garbage because he sees that I'm in pain. She's like, oh, what an amazing man. He took out the garbage. And it's amazing. We went through this ourselves and I've gone through this with so many clients. Like he can be doing, let's say 100 tasks a week and getting nothing from her. And then he gets all these emotional pieces in place and then he starts doing 10 things a week. And she's like, oh, you're a god. Thank you so much. Right. So because you're actually giving her what she needs and she understands it's because you see her, because she's special, because you want to make her feel safe. And that's what guys don't miss. And that's why the most common relationship problem I see for men is like, she doesn't appreciate anything I do. And they'll try to outwork it. They'll try to do more tasks. And it's like, no, dude, the solution is not to do more. The solution is to figure out what's missing for her emotionally, because I can promise you, once she gets that in place, she'll start giving you back the things that you need. And, the terrible thing about women is if they have an empty cup, like you're not going to be getting anything back from her. Like it's just a fact. But the wonderful thing about women is if her cup starts to overflow, she's going to immediately pour back into your cup and she won't need a coaching program. She won't need to read books on relationships. Like she'll just be like, oh, I already know your needs. And now that I have enough in me, I can immediately start filling your needs. And she'll want to, and she'll be happy to do it. And she'll act like that's what she's always been doing. And she won't even notice she's doing it. It's like default mode, right? Whereas men, we need a little bit more work. But yeah, I'm saying that to try to be encouraging. It's like, no matter where you're at, like if you put in those missing pieces, she will not just be willing to do the things that make you happy. Like she'll do them without you asking and she'll be thrilled to do them. And she'll maybe even do more of them than you need because that's the first thing she wants to do when her cup is overflowing.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Like for us, it's, when I say us, I mean women, everything is about how we feel, how we're feeling. So if we feel terrible, but you're doing all the things, it's not going to register. Exactly pretty much what Matt said. But if we feel amazing, like you're making us feel great, and you did the dishes once in the last 2 weeks, I'm like, he did the dishes like 2 weeks ago. That was great. Like that was, I really appreciate that. So, I mean, it all just comes down to how we're being made to feel. And I know, like, yes, there's accountability. Like, I'm in charge of my feelings, but I'm not really. I'm in charge of how I express my emotions. I'm in charge of how I translate what I'm feeling. But like, I'm not necessarily, I can't control what it is I'm feeling in any given moment.
I've noticed that.
Yeah. If I could just like, go from magic, get a magic wand and just go from being sad and just go happy, like I would do it, right? But I can't. So,
well, no one can, right? No,
right,
I think all that you can do is the expression. What I say to my littles is there's no bad feelings. There are bad expressions, right? Yeah. So I'm never going to say like anger is bad, but no, you can't just punch someone in the face because you're mad. So not every expression is welcome. Every feeling is welcome. And I don't want to do the whole women and accountability, and it's like accountability chasing the woman, right? And it never catches up because like, yes, like we all have masculine and feminine within us. And I think it is important to like still nurture that masculine, which is like a little bit more disciplined, because some women, it is like totally uncontained to where it is toxic. Before I get into like women and their responsibility when it comes to like appreciation and respect and love to a man, I will say to all of the men that like immediately jump on the woman as the one to blame, I think that you shouldn't be blaming anybody. It's a relationship, so both people play a part. But if you want to fall into like the trad movement of like men are the only leader of the house, like who is responsible for the energy of a company? And it's the CEO. It's the leader of the building. So if you have a tyrant that is operating the company and he's making everyone feel unsafe or it's unpredictable or whatever the case might be, like the buck stops with him. So the employees might be acting out in a way that is irresponsible, sure, like that shouldn't be tolerated either. But at the end of the day, like the buck stops with the leader of the household. So again, I think the most change happens when like the guy steps into masculinity and leadership, because it can be, when you're in it, especially as like such an emotional creature, it is so hard to like pull yourself away from the emotions and understand what I'm seeing and experiencing might not be an accurate depiction of reality. It's kind of warped or distorted, and you need someone to kind of lead you there. Now, on the flip side, I love Alison Armstrong's work. I reference her all of the time, and I definitely fell into the category at a time of my life where I was taking a prince and turning him into a frog, right? So it's all of these ways that you unintentionally emasculate or tear down like a great man, and you actually make him into the thing that you don't want. So it's by not showing appreciation, by not saying thank you, by like using sex as a weapon, which I definitely want to get into with both of you. By nagging, by infantilizing him, right? Like treating him like he's just like one of your kids that's not ever doing anything right. So there's all of these ways that women also are participating in the like degradation of the relationship. So when you were like experiencing your separation and you were living apart and you had this idea that you had to leave and that the relationship was no longer there, he wasn't right for you, how did you get from a place where that was the reality that you saw with him to like seeing, oh no, he is my partner, this can be fixed, and like seeing him as a king instead of as the frog? So seeing him as the king that I see him as now did not happen right away. It didn't happen while we were separated. It didn't happen even right when we got back together. There was a long period of time where we had to like work through this in a really, really messy way. Matt didn't have Matt to help him. He was doing it all on his own, so it was a lot messier. But for me, part of why I felt so unhappy and destabilized in our relationship was because I didn't think that Matt understood anything that I was going through, and I didn't even think he liked me. Like I was like, okay, I think you're here out of duty because you're a good man. He's never not been a good man. He's always been a good man. But I don't want to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't like me, like who's just here because he thinks he should be, you know? And he wasn't doing or saying anything in a way that I could hear that proved otherwise, right? So during our time apart, he started looking at himself. I didn't know this was happening, obviously. And he started taking radical responsibility. And he just decided, like, I'm going to blame myself for everything, which is like, you know, sounds crazy because obviously it takes two. I was a big player in the degradation of our marriage. But
he just decided, I'm going to take full responsibility. And when he did, he slowly started to see some of the things that I had been trying to tell him that I needed and that were not working. And he figured it out. He really did. And so we went on this trip together. He asked me if I'd go away with him. And I said, okay, for the sake of our family, like I have to give this at least one more try. Right. And he sounds different. Okay, let me try.
Shout out to Mike for convincing her to actually go with
his very best friend, who's very uncomfortable emotionally, or talking about emotional things, I should say, called me. And I knew, okay, if his best friend is calling me, like this is.
He's a good salesman, so thank you for that.
He's a very successful salesman. He'll like that I said that. Anyway, so I went away with Mike. I went away with Matt, and he said all the things that I wanted to hear. Basically, it's like, but it came from, it wasn't like he was repeating it back. Like he knew exactly what I'd been saying. And I was like, oh my goodness. Okay. Well, this is something I can work from. Like if you actually understand me now, like I'm not screaming at a blank, like at a wall, like, you know what I mean? Like you get it. Okay. I can work from here. And then that was why I decided to try again. And, that started the healing of our marriage. And then from there, it was just like a ton of conversations, missteps, back and forth. And then, but I don't know, through that process, there was a magic that happened that Matt is much better with words than I am, and he's better at explaining complex ideas and things.
No,
so
you're doing great.
No, but I'll maybe let you explain this a little better. But I don't know how to describe it, but there was like a magic that happened, like a closeness that developed of like, it's like two warriors like going into battle. Like we went to battle together to save whatever we thought this was. You know what I mean? And then there was this epiphany moment, I don't know, God moment, whatever you want to call it, where I was like, there is no going back. Like, this is what I want, no matter what. And regardless of how difficult it is and what it's going to take and what I have to face about myself and all those things, it was like, I didn't know at that time that I was going to be facing a bunch of things, but in retrospect, so there was a change for sure. There was like a devotional change that happened through that.
And it sounds like when you use the word like magic, it kind of just was like bestowed upon you. It wasn't like a calculated, pragmatic, like I'm going to do this. It was a feeling like you just kind of
100%
got taken over.
Yeah, because I have been called pragmatic in different ways. And I think, we were struggling for many, many years before we were no longer together, right? So there was that, like, I'm going to be in this because we're married, both of us, I think. And then there wasn't, right? So no, I wasn't making a choice out of duty or because out of religion or anything. There was something a deep feeling inside of myself that emerged through this path that we went down together. And whatever that switch was, like, it's been turned on. Our relationship is amazing now. So it's hard to even imagine, but there's a switch that's been turned on, at least inside of me, where like, there's no way I'm going anywhere, no matter what. Like I don't think that that's necessarily that's right for everybody, that no matter what mentality. And I don't think you should even have that unless you have what I'm trying to explain, which is not
you're
very
doing
well,
fantastic.
But because I don't think, like, no matter what for everybody, like, divorce shouldn't be an option. It's like, I don't actually believe that.
It shouldn't be a life sentence.
No. Yeah, exactly. But there is this thing inside of me, and in both of us, where there is no back door. It's unconditional at this point. We've been through everything. And that's a really great place to be. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So it actually ties in beautifully to this next thing I wanted to get into. So I don't know if you've seen the trend about duty sex. It was all over X for a while, and like a lot of like the bro space took it over. And it's constantly saying how men have to do all of their duties within the marriage. They have to protect, they have to provide, they have to be your best friend. Like, we have this huge list, and if they do anything short, like, we immediately say divorce and and you get to see the kids every other weekend. And it goes back to like this victim mentality for men and like how hard it is on them. But women don't have any responsibility to do their duties as a wife. And it always is just like cleaning, taking care of the kids, and having sex whenever the guy wants it. And I am a huge critic of women weaponizing sex. I think that is gross, and you should never do that. It shouldn't be like, I'm mad at you, so you don't get any, or like whatever. I don't like that at all. But I also believe that you have to like be in your body, and your body does have an intelligence. And if there is an underlying feeling of I'm not safe or I don't want to do this, that you shouldn't force yourself to do that either. So we all know how important sex and connection is to maintaining a marriage, right? It can be equated to kind of like the nutrients of the relationship. So it is very important, even when you are not in the best place, that you're still maintaining sex. But like, where is the line between knowing that the minute that you stop doing it, that could be potentially very dangerous for the relationship. You shouldn't weaponize it, but at the same time, no one should be participating unless it's like a full body yes. So how do you deal with that in the messiness of a marriage?
I'm sure you have some good thoughts there on this, but
I'll let you.
Yeah, like one thing that's important for men to understand is, and that's important for women to understand too, is like men need sex in order to feel connected. Like that's part of how we express our love. That's part of how we feel loved. It's, yeah, we're horny and there's all kinds of reasons we want sex, but like that's how we feel really connected. And without that, we simply don't feel connected. And women are kind of the opposite direction. It's like they need to feel connected in order to have sex. And because men don't know that, because we kind of think, Alison Armstrong way, we think women are just little men and women might think we're just hairy women. We don't know that they're different. We don't understand that sometimes like her body is saying no in a big way, because our bodies don't really say no, right? Like, there's some extreme examples we can all think of to prove that, right? Like we can get it done. But when sex is weaponized, it's not just that the guy doesn't get off because he can figure that out on his own. It's like he doesn't get the connection he really wants with his wife. And he feels like he is being rejected by her, because we are, female mate selection, that's consistent across most mammals. What that means is the woman watches, the female moose watches the male moose's, bash antlers. And then whoever she thinks is best, she goes and, makes babies with them. And so part of our brain is going, oh, I'm not good enough to mate with. I'm not good enough to mix genes with. So we feel that rejection on a really, really, really deep level. And what I think it's helpful for women to understand is just how painful that is for us. And it's helpful for men to understand, like sometimes their body is just saying no. So all that to say, since your audience is male and I work with men, it's really important to build with her a level of trust that she can back off when she wants. Like, not every kiss has to lead to sex. Not every hot makeout session has to lead to sex. And, training, can be taken as a derogatory way, but like train your wife to understand that if you say, not right now, you're okay with that. It shows you're not needy. It shows you are independent. It shows you like you can stand on your own 2 feet and you're cool, you're okay. Because the more that you do that, the more she's going to be willing to have duty sex with you, because she knows she can say no. And sometimes, not to spill any secrets, but like sometimes Whitney's less into sex than I am, right? And
there are days.
Yeah, like there are days.
That's so normal for women, though.
Yeah,
I think that's universal.
Well, yeah,
100%.
My
Our
cycle
cycles too. Yeah,
we both said it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, and the more I understand that, the more I'm like, oh, you know what? This is probably not going to be the week of the most amazing sex in our marriage. And if she's down to have like some quick rollover sex, like great, but if she's not down for that, it's up to me again as a leader to go, oh, I know her well enough. Again, like using the CEO analogy is like, you're not a good CEO if you don't know your employees, right? If you don't know your managers. And so,
not that we're saying that wives are employees, but
no, but like
idea,
I'm saying
idea,
in that leadership,
just
Candice said it first.
No, but she can say it. Okay. Just to put that.
Yeah. So like, if you don't actually know her well enough, like you're not going to make a good decision. So, but if you do know her well enough and you really actually care about her needs, you will be able to read her and go, oh, not right now. But since men don't even really think of that, we're just like, oh, we're ready to go. We don't know that. We don't know how painful it can be for women to have sex when they're not in the mood, even with somebody that they love. And if you do that with your wife enough times in a row, she will start associating that feeling with having sex with you, and you're going to have less sex. You're going to have less good sex. You're going to have less of the sex that you really want to have. And so it's really important to, like, as a man, say, hey, you know what? Sometimes she's not in the mood. And I promise you, if you do that, like, you'll have more and better sex on average. And you won't get into a position where you're not having sex at all.
No, I think you said something that I think is so valuable, and I want to highlight it for, I think, every listener. If you get to the point where you feel that every single physical interaction has to lead to sex, that is so much pressure on a woman because of our cycles. And like, you guys aren't going to understand because like you guys go through yours so quick in a day, but ours span about a week. So if we're in a lull and like it just, sometimes it doesn't even feel like, for me, so I can only speak to me and me, that I think some other women might resonate. Like, I won't feel anything. It's like if I'm in a certain part of my cycle, it would take like something very high powered for me to like be able to get where I need to go, just because the hormones aren't there.
Or it can hurt even sometimes.
Right.
When it doesn't
yeah.
hurt
Like you're not
time.
like self-lubricating. It's just their hormones aren't there to do what you need to do. So if like you have trained me, and it is true, because it's like, it's almost like we're all living in like a Pavlov's experiment, right? Like, so something happens and then there's another thing that follows, and now I can link those two behaviors together. So if every time that you hold my hand or like come in for a passionate kiss, you are expecting it to go all of the way, like that is so much pressure. And then now I feel like almost used in a way, like we can't just connect in this moment and then it stop. So that creates a lot of aversion for some women, and then they'll pull back even more and more. So now she doesn't even want to engage with a kiss because she's like, well, I don't want to have sex.
Or even holding hands.
Right. And then he's like, I was just going to kiss. Well, all the behaviors before had made me like leaving to assume that this is where it's going to go and it's not where I want to be. So this was in, I think her name is Emily Nagasaki or something. It's Come As You Are. It's a really brilliant book. And she kind of, it's very research based. And one of the stories is a woman that had this exact experience. It was like, she couldn't get aroused by her partner because of the almost performance anxiety. So her assignment was stop having sex. Don't have sex for 30 days at all. And anything else is allowed. So you can kind of like reprogram your brain and the relationship that like not everything has to lead there. So like this can just be a soft touch. This can just be like an erotic kiss. This can just be a shower. It doesn't have to be so much, like have so much weight to it. And I think that's so important.
Yeah. And there's something like really powerful as a man that's really attractive to women. Tell me if I'm wrong. But when, you know, things are moving in that direction and you're like, okay, the launch sequence is ignited. Like this is going in one direction now. And then she's like, oh, you know what? Like, not right now for XYZ. And your response is like, oh, totally get it. No big deal. Like, let's watch a movie. Like you do that 2 or 3 times and she knows she has that option on the table. It's like, you're going to get way less no's in the future. And the yeses that you do get are going to be way bigger.
They'll be very excited. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like you'll get, she'll be like, oh, this is safe. Well, I want to open to him more, and like her body will open more. Like all the things you want to happen will happen. But that comes again from like you setting the tone that in this relationship, we're allowed to say no to each other. And as a man, I'm not going to be butthurt and pouting and wimping in the corner because, I thought we were going to, now we didn't. It's like, that's not attractive energy.
No.
And you repeat that enough times in your relationship, like watch where that gets you.
100%. Yeah. The more you respect our like everyone wants their boundaries respected, right? It's the same thing. The more you respect our boundaries, the more safe I feel with you, the more open I am to you, and then there's a heck of a lot more sex that enters the picture in that scenario.
Yeah. And I think boundaries is the right word. Cause like the analogy I use with clients is if she's got a bit of a wall up with you and every time she puts that wall up, your response is to like try to break through it. Like she's going to have to make a thicker wall. Right. And if instead what you do is like, every time she puts a wall up, you go, oh, okay, no big deal. She learns over time, oh, this wall doesn't need to be quite as big. It doesn't need to be quite as thick. I can let it down more often. And like, that's, if you want your wife to have her walls down, stop bashing into them when they go up. A buddy of mine has a great line. It's like, you can't out masculine a woman who's inner masculine. Like you can only outstill her. And what most guys do is they feel insecure and they're like, oh, and then they try to overpower her. And it's like, you're just reinforcing her. Like, I need bigger walls with this guy. I need to close down to him. And if you can just outstill her and then we'll be like, hey, totally cool with me. Like, I'm okay. Like, I'm a man who's standing on my own 2 feet. Yeah, this kind of sucks and it's not what I would choose, but like, I'm going to be okay. She's going to look at you as somebody like, oh, you're okay. Like you're standing on your own 2 feet. Like I admire that. I respect that. I look up to that, and things will go your way more often.
So getting into communication and kind of like tying back into all emotions are valid, but not all expressions are valid. Let's get into anger a little bit, because when we talk about men that have been emasculated by their moms, by their schools, by their lovers, right? It's constantly this punishment for being a man. So you get these more feminine guys, or you get very dangerous men who aren't capable. So what does healthy anger look like within men, and then also within a dynamic? So like, let's say you're in an argument, like what's tolerable, what's not tolerable as far as anger and aggression go?
Yeah. I mean, you're going to feel angry sometimes, like, right? Like, and especially if you're married, like she's going to know all the buttons to push. And if she's in a mood where she wants to piss you off, like she's going to find a way. Right. And I think it's your job to not be angry. And there are going to be times where like you can't control it, but then it's up to you. Again, if you want to be the leader in your relationship, it's up to you to say, hey, look, I'm starting to get really pissed off. And if I stay here, this is not going to be a conversation that either of us are going to enjoy. So I'm going to step out. And the problem with that is a lot of, like, let's say she starts chasing, saying, no, we're having this conversation now. It's like, no, like you said a no, and now you retreat to your bedroom. And if you have to, you retreat to your car and you drive somewhere and, let her know you're coming back. But like, it's very hard to express things from anger and have them help the relationship. If you need to express anger, my recommendation to guys is like, go process that anger on your own. Like write it down on a piece of paper and crumple it up and stomp on it. Like beat the shit out of a pillow, go hit the heavy bag, go to the gym, like do whatever you got to do. And when anger is still there, but it's no longer controlling the words you say, then go have that conversation. And it's your responsibility to not do that. Because one of the things that men do not understand about women that I did not understand is just how sensitive to threat they are. And I had no idea that I was making Whitney feel unsafe until I listened to Alison Armstrong's seminar, which every man listening to this should get, Understanding Women, Unraveling the Mystery. And she talked about safety. And basically what it comes down to is, on average in a male-female relationship, he's going to be bigger, stronger, and more capable of violence. And when you're angry at her and you're at home alone, she is trapped alone with a predatory creature who's bigger and stronger than her and who's angry at her. And even if the front of her brain, is going, he's not going to hurt me.
He would never do that.
He would never do that. He never has. I know him. I trust him. The back of her brain is going, alert, predator, unsafe. And from that position, like, you're not going to get anywhere constructive. She's going to, try to placate you or try to overpower you or try to escape you, but you're not going to accomplish anything. So it's really important that you learn she will actually feel physically unsafe when you're angry with her. And I remember listening to that in the car with Whitney, just going like, is that true? She was like, yeah, of course. And it was like so obvious to her. And I was like, that never occurred to me. Like it never occurred to me that my wife would be afraid of me. And for most guys, when they understand that, like, it's a major gut punch and it's a good gut punch, it's like, oh shit, like she actually is scared of me. And I used to be, I was such a moron. Like she would be, retreat to the bedroom and I'd be like, oh, okay, well, I know it's not healthy to let the sun go down in your anger. So we're not going to bed angry. And so I'd like pick the lock and I'd be like, oh, she's going to think I'm kind of cool because I know how to pick locks. And instead she's like retreating to safety in your bedroom. I'm like, no, you're not safe here. Like I will find you. Right. And I thought I was doing the right thing. I really did think I was doing the right thing. Because I just didn't understand that's how safety works for women. So it's really important. So as far as anger goes, like process that shit on your own. Like don't bring anger to your wife and your kids. You can send them to bed on time without being angry. You can tell her that you're working too hard and she's not giving you the appreciation that you deserve without anger. And if you can't do that, then you got to learn how to show up with that king energy more, because that's not what you're bringing. You're bringing the energy of the tyrant king, the pouting little boy.
So would you say that you wouldn't agree that is like not allowing a man to be a man, that like by saying like you can't be angry, like it would is that the same as telling a woman she can't be emotional?
No, I'm not saying you can't be angry, but again, it's kind of what you're saying is like, you can't express that anger in an unsafe way. Like I get angry all the time, but what I try to do, and I fail at this often, what I try to do is like, I'll be angry, but I'll still communicate from a place of love. If I let the anger control the way I communicate, that's when it's a problem.
I'll ask you, is this how you want to be talking to me right now? And he'll go, no.
Yeah, she'll say, and then it'll make my anger so much worse when she says that. And I'll be like, she's right. I'm like, no.
I'm like, I know it's not what you want to do. So like, I'm like, do you want to like circle back? Another thing too is to not allow the internal processor that we have to dictate what is going on. So like what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. Matt was upset with something. that I had done. So long story short, my son put a spoon in the microwave. Okay. And I freaked out because I was like, oh my God, it's going to explode.
Yeah.
So I'm running and I'm like yelling. I'm like, sure, why'd you put the spoon in the microwave? And I'm like pressing the button. And my son's, he's super emotional because like he's not used to mom getting mad or yelling or anything like that. And he's also not used to mom being really scared. And so he started crying. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I felt so terrible, right? But I was like in panic mode because of the spoon. And Matt comes out and he talks to me and he was saying very reasonable things about my behavior, that it was like I kind of flew off the handle and it was uncalled for essentially. Even though I really thought I was like I had to freak out because I thought it was going to explode. But anyway, and my initial like reaction was like I was angry because I felt like he was in my internal decoder system. I heard you're a bad mom. Mm-hmm. I didn't hear your behavior should be different or you should calm down or you shouldn't do. I heard you're a bad mom. And so in the past I would go off that. Like that was my truth, was what I was feeling about it, not what he actually said. And then I'd have to win. I have to win that battle because I have to defend the fact that I'm a good mom, right? So what I'll do is I'll slow down, I'll breathe, I take a deep breath, and I'm still feeling the anger, my heart's racing, my face is flushing, right? And I'm like, when you say this, do you mean that you think I'm a bad mom? And he's like, no. In what world did you get that from? I did not say that's not what I mean. I think you're an amazing mother. Da-da. I just think this. And I'm like, okay, cool. Okay, I can work with that. Yeah, okay, you're right. So not letting our own assessment of the communication to be what's accurate, because often it's not, and it takes asking questions and going a bit deeper before we get to the truth of it. And the other piece of that is I'm choosing to trust him. I'm choosing to trust what he's telling me he thinks versus what I think he thinks. Right? And we all do that so much. We assign intention to people. We assign ideas. We assign all these different things. And we bring all of our past experiences and relationships into our current ones. And it's like, well, so-and-so did, when they said this, they meant that. So that's what you must mean, right? So anyway, it's a lot of slowing down, right? And breathing and And so both of us experience anger, but we don't get angry at one another, or we try very, very hard.
And if we do, we try to, especially me, I try to own it quickly and just come back and be I still think I was right, but what I said was not right. So I'll go back and be hey, I got to eat shit on this one.
Yeah, and same. And I do too. There were, can't even remember, but there was something happened a couple weeks ago where I came back to Matt and I was like, hey, that was, I shouldn't have done that, or whatever it was, and I was wrong, and and then he's like, oh, man, it's you didn't have to come, you were fine. But I'm like, no.
Yeah, well, that's been the crazy thing is the more accountability I take, Whitney will come up and after I was being a little bitch and I was being whiny and I was blaming her for things, I was totally in the wrong, and she'll come back to me and be like, hey, you made a good point, I shouldn't have said this, and I'm sorry for that, and I was like, oh. That was actually totally on me, but thank you. So yeah, the accountability thing can go both ways, but there has to be that safety first, and that leading by example of hey, I'm willing to take my accountability.
Well, we had someone in our home actually that witnessed that argument, the one with I thought he was calling me a bad mom for the spoon situation, and the person who was there was he was watching it, and he said to me after, he's like, Can you teach my wife how to react that way? Because Matt was really harsh there. He was really harsh. He goes, and you were so calm. And I was like, no, I can't, because it's Matt. It's how he shows up every day in our relationship, and has for the last several years, that has allowed me to be this way. Now this is who I am now, and this is who I'll be, hopefully forever. And I'm this way in every interaction. It's who I've become. But it took him leading by example and giving me that profound, incredible sense of safety and trust for me to be able to let my walls down and not fight him anymore and believe him, So yes, I can give women tools. I can tell them all the things I did, but in the heat of the moment when they're feeling all those deep emotions, no, I can't guarantee that she's going to react the way I did, because what are you doing?
Right. Life's not a vacuum.
No, exactly.
Yeah, the shouting thing is interesting, and tying it to safety makes so much sense when you say it out loud. I was doing this podcast, and we had these like rules of engagement laid out prior, like it was going to be respectful, like no bringing up certain topics. And I like sat there for 6.5 hours where this person is like breaking every single rule essentially. And in 6.5 hours, and I'm like, I've got to go. Like he started screaming and cursing at me. And I was like, I am not going to show women that this is okay to let a man talk to you this way. And I'm not going to show men that it's okay to talk to a woman this way. And his argument was, because of feminism and equality, that he now gets to treat women how he would treat a man. And I was like, I dare you to talk to me like that in front of any of my guy friends or like my man. It's not going to end well for you. And he's like, well, you guys want equality, so I'm sorry you don't like my tone. But it's like, are you now in the camp that like there's no difference between men and women? Because there fundamentally is. So maybe you can get away with like yelling at another guy. I don't see that going well for good. You're gonna end up in fists. But and maybe in your world that's okay, but I don't know any person that is like sane or like locked down, grounded in reality that thinks that's okay to talk to a woman or a child that way. No. You just don't, because you're bigger, stronger, and it's just inappropriate. It just shows me that you're not in control of yourself or your expression. And in the parenting community right now, it's a really big point of contention is, can you yell at your kid? Because some people say we're making kids really soft and we're making them fragile. And I see this. Everything is constantly like everything is power versus force, right? So if you're forcing something, you're going to get it met on the other side. So what I see is now these parents that are trying to advocate for spanking and hitting your kid again, and they're like, see, like this actually worked. I was like, no, it doesn't. Like you can look at all the studies, it doesn't work at all. But they see these kids that can't handle life. So now you have people that are kind of in the middle, and they're saying, can you shout at your kid or yell at your kid as a parenting tool? And there's this really big podcaster, I think his name's like Josh Delaney, maybe.
I think I know the guy you're talking about. Yeah. Relationships, right?
Yeah. And he says the same thing, that you make them feel fundamentally unsafe, and then you're trying to demand emotional regulation out of this little whose brain's not done when you yourself are not emotionally regulated because you're yelling. So I'm in the camp of no yelling. I certainly fall short of that. I wish it's like every day I want to be 1% better, but I absolutely yell, and I'm trying to do it less. And I do agree that you shouldn't if you can put in the work to not do it. But I don't know what I'm going to guess what your
I consider every time I yell as a failure, and I fail, a few times a year. But I always look like I do everything in my life is like, okay, first and foremost, what was my role in that? It's like, well, they were bugging the shit out of me for 45 minutes before I yelled, right? It's like, I probably should have stopped them 42 minutes ago, and I didn't. I also don't think, once in a while, if kids get yelled at, if it's in the context of like a generally healthy parenting style, it's like, you know what? At least the first time they get yelled by somebody else, it's not going to be brand new to them. It's not the end. It's not the end of the world. Like, I don't think it does a lot of damage if you yell once in a while. I think it's like, if it's regular, but yeah, I look at it the same way as I look in the relationship. It's like, if I get angry enough to yell, that's always because there was something I should have said that I didn't say, or something I should have did that I didn't do. And I have to track that so that, if I yell at Whitney, I can go, okay, well, what happened? It's like, well, I'll make up an example. She threw out my nicotine pouches 19 times in a row. And every time she did, I said, oh no, it's okay. And then the 20th time I just yelled at her and lost my shit. It's like, well, probably on the first time I said, hey, I don't appreciate when you do that. You might not like these, which she's fine with them, but theoretically, you might not like that I have nicotine pouches, but those are mine. I don't want you to throw them out. Right. The fact that I let it get to that point where I had to explode is because I didn't actually have a strong enough no before then. So I look at anger and yelling very much as like, I have failed at some point along the way that led to that moment. And that's where I should focus my attention. It's like, where did I fail? What could I have done to not get that angry? Right. Yeah, no, for sure. Like, when our kids, if our daughter, she's 7, our 12-year-old's a little bit better at picking up after himself. But, if I'm cleaning up after her regularly and that she's used to that, and then one day I decide the mess is too much and I freak out at her, it's like, well, why wasn't I teaching her to clean up from the get-go? Right? Like that's on me. If I lose my cool because she made a mess, but in her world, making a mess is okay because she's never been told otherwise, it's like, yeah, that's definitely. Yeah, if you yell in that circumstance, that's like, okay, well, I should have clearly been more patient making sure she cleans up the last 2 weeks. Yeah, I should have put those boundaries in place. Like this is what we do.
you know? So I also, I'm with you. I don't ever want to yell at my children. But yeah, it's definitely happened. Like in the last story. But yeah.
Yeah, we're all human.
Yes,
we're
for
gonna
sure.
fall short
Oh
in
my
so
goodness,
many
yeah.
ways.
Oh yeah.
So when you have these men that are signing up for the program, one of the things I was saying in the car is women, like you guys will hang in there. You'll white knuckle it and you will stay. And there's like this very shallow, low hanging fruit to blame all women for the end of relationships. It's like, well, women are responsible for initiating 70% of divorces. Well, what they don't say is in those relationships or in like the end of those relationships, if you were to actually ask, like most guys are like, oh, like, yeah, it was amicable by the time of the divorce. But I think in the beginning, like there is a chunk of guys that kind of feel blindsided and they're like, well, where is this coming from? Like everything seems fine and we've been good. And women tend to kind of even subconsciously kind of hold on to like every little infraction or any little moment that you felt unsafe. And we can say that we have forgiven you and maybe we think that we do, but at some point like that weight becomes too much to bear. And then I think that's what kind of gets the ball rolling. So how, like, what are some things that men can look for that will be able to maybe like be an injunction before it gets to that point?
Yeah. So one of the things to understand about women is that they communicate really differently, right? And this whole like men and women are equal legally thing does not mean that men and women are functionally identical and the same, right? And we kind of confuse equality with sameness. And women communicate differently than men. And if I was to say to Whitney, like, you know, oh, you wore those shoes on our date, like she would remember that and she would not wear those shoes again on our date, right? If she would say it to me, I'd be like, oh, and that's the extent of my whole thought process on it. Like that's the whole thing. So what happens so often in relationships, and we see this like every day, is she'll have been making those little comments for years and he will literally not know. And this is super, super common. And we'll be working through with our client, like, hey, you know, what went wrong? What's she unhappy about? And he does not know. And I know if I talk to her, she'd be like, I have told him 1,000 times. So a lot of it just comes down to communication. And yes, would it be more effective if women learned to communicate more explicitly? Like, yeah, 100%. That's something we work on all the time is like, okay, Whitney, I hear where you're coming from, but next time I need you to actually say words that I understand. Because
I didn't explicit.
Yeah, you have to be very explicit because I don't read in between the lines. Like I don't, and Whitney, same thing with the kids. Like I won't notice things that the kids need, and Whitney will notice them, and it's super obvious to her, right? So she assumes that I'm the same way, and it's like I'm not. Like I need clear instructions. But again, we don't work with women, so we work with men. And so what I tell men to do is until you kind of safely coach her on how to communicate with you more explicitly, you're going to have to read between the lines because if you don't, you will be blindsided. And so if she's made a lot of comment about whatever, the dishes, it's like, okay, well, what does that actually mean? And he'll start saying, well, I actually do the dishes more. And he's like, okay, well, yeah, you might do the dishes more than her, but there's some underlying emotional need she's trying to express to you. She thinks she's expressing it really clearly and you're not answering because you don't love her, because you don't see her, because you don't care. And in reality, you don't even notice, you don't know. So you have to learn to interpret. And yeah, it's work. It's a pain in the ass. It would be nicer if it wasn't. Gay marriage is legal. If you want a relationship where you don't have to work on your communication, go try that out. Maybe that's your thing.
And you'll have lots of sex.
You'll have lots of sex. The communication will be no issue. Very low divorce rate, you know. But assuming you want to be married to a feminine woman, like you got to learn how to communicate in this way. And so, you know, the safe, seen, special, supported, like every complaint that she has is one of those 4 categories. And so if she's complaining about the dishes, you might do 99% of the dishes. What she's really saying is, I don't feel emotionally supported in this relationship. And if you want a relationship that thrives instead of heading towards disconnection, you better pay attention and learn to speak her language. And once you have learned to speak her language, then you can teach her to speak yours. But if you lead in that category and you're like, okay, I actually understand where she's coming from, you won't be blindsided. And this is the first work we do with guys that we're working with is like, okay, we're going to excavate the history of little comments she's made to you and we're going to figure it out. And then you can go to her and say, hey, I finally get it. And she goes, oh, I've been saying this and she's just so relieved and she starts crying. She's like, I'm trying to get you to understand this for years. And he's like, I just didn't know what the hell you meant. Like I didn't get it. So that's one piece that really has to be worked on. And I actually forget the question now.
It was, I'm trying to remember too. We were talking about not letting it get to the point of separation or divorce. So like, what can a man look out for to find that she's like truly unhappy? So he's not like,
Okay.
I didn't see this coming. Yeah. So again, you guys aren't mind readers. I think it's called like cross-sex mind reading is the expectation. And we both are going to always fall short because you're not a woman and I'm not a man.
When we don't do mind reading.
Different languages.
We speak different, exactly. We speak different languages. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally.
Like with my buddies, like if I'm annoying them, they're just gonna be like, stop being annoying.
So would you say like probably nagging is one of them?
Okay. Yeah. So specific signs. So this is a bit of a conceptual answer, but I'll give the practical part at the end. Like if a woman is in a state of disconnect, she's going to put on her disconnected glasses. And she's going to look back at the history of the relationship and all she's going to see is disconnect. If she's feeling unsupported, she's going to put on the unsupported glasses. She's going to look back at the history of the relationship. She's only going to see how you haven't supported her. And so if she's looking at the history of your relationship, the present of your relationship, or the future of your relationship, and she's saying it's always been this way and it's always going to be this way, she's in a state of disconnect from you. And if you don't recognize that disconnect is going to grow and you guys are going to end. So that's a really big sign to look through is like, oh, you always do things this way. You've always been this way. And for guys, that's so confusing because we're like, hold on, we always have bad sex. It's like, but you've told me we've had amazing sex 1,000 times. Like this doesn't make any sense. Like, okay, she's got those disconnected glasses on. You have to figure out why those disconnected glasses are on. And if you can, she'll take those glasses off and she'll put on the connected glasses, and then you've always had great sex and you've always been supported and it's always going to be amazing. And this is why in so many relationships, it's like she says she wants to get divorced this week and the next week she wants to plan a vacation in 8 months. And the guy's like, what is happening? Like, which one is it? It's like, well, she had different glasses on, and you need to recognize that. So that's a big one I'd look for is if she's seeing the whole history of your relationship as always bad, that's a reflection of what she's feeling right now. Because men act very much from like their beliefs and principles. And good thing we do, because we have to learn to like sublimate our emotions to our beliefs. Otherwise the world would be very violent. Right. So we learn at a young age, like I have to do what I believe is right and not what I feel. Whereas women, the magic that they offer the world is like they feel everything and they can experience everything and they're in the moment. And so they're acting from what they feel. They're playful.
Yeah.
And so if she is acting in a way that seems bitter and disconnected, it's because she is feeling bitter and disconnected, and you better recognize that and learn how to flick that love switch back on and get her in a healthy place.
I love what you just said about emotions for men, and that you guys have to kind of have that discipline and almost like essentially like be a little bit disconnected or have like a little bit of space, like intentional disconnection is, I've never heard anyone word it that way. And that's actually makes so much sense because in this place where I think everything's an overcorrection, we're trying to make everything super feminine now because of like the patriarchy, and we're trying to like make men, I think, maybe a little bit too emotional. There is a shadow to that. And I'm not a dude, so like I never piece that together, but that makes perfect sense.
No, there's nothing more dangerous than a man who can't control his emotions. And like there is a time and a place for a man to feel everything fully, to express it fully. It's probably not in the middle of a fight with your wife. And you see a lot of these men, especially the men who are more in like, that side of things, like, F the patriarchy and all that. They're completely controlled by their emotion and their resentment. And they're like these weak, passive, bitter, unhelpful, unproductive, useless men. A man who's not in control of his emotions is not a man, full stop. And so, I cried during every Disney movie I watch, and, I'm very in touch with my emotions, but like, I know when to step back from them, and you have to be able to do that as a man. And then I go,
so different. Like there's even, so this is something I picked up on just listening to different men speaking at, during podcasts or whatever. The amount of times I've heard a man say, and I like, I was imagining, like murdering the guy because, who hasn't done that? Who hasn't imagined killing someone? And I'm like, what? I've literally never imagined killing someone. It is not a normal thing.
I've imagined killing like 4 people today.
Yeah. So it's like, we're so different in that way. So yes, like no one is saying that men and your emotions don't matter. No, they matter so much more because of what goes on,
the capability.
Exactly. And so it's like, that's why it's so important to be in control of them. And I think that that's where a lot of people get wrong, where a lot of people go wrong when they hear these kinds of discussions sometimes is they think we're saying that like men's feelings don't have a place or that they just need to be in control all the time, be stoic. And women are the ones that can just go be emotional infants and whatever. It's like, no. There's a different weight to our emotions and a man's emotions.
And there's nothing, more powerful that you can do in a relationship is when, like if Whitney's just like having a bad day or a bad week or it's that part of the month and she's like a little bit off the rocker a little bit. And I can just be there and be like, I'm not threatened by your emotions. Like you need to kind of just like, blah. It's like, okay, like I'm here for that. Like I'm right here. I'm looking at you in the eyes.
I usually
I'm
preface
totally
it now. I'm like, just so you know,
Well,
I'm
that's the
feeling
thing
a
that
little-
happens.
I always warn everybody.
I'm warning you.
If you're like a self-aware woman, which a lot of women aren't, and if you can just be that non-reactive, emotionally stable presence when somebody's not feeling that way, it's like, that's a real gift to offer. And the thing is, like, you do that enough, like when I'm being a little bitch sometimes, Whitney will be there for me and like she'll be that place of stability. And that was not the case before.
Right. Yeah, no. And I actually, I love when I can be like, I get to be this for him now. Like that's pretty cool. It feels good. You know, I don't look at you and think, oh, what a weak, pathetic man. I'm like, oh, baby, like, you know?
See, and that's the narrative that gets pushed too, is that you are not allowed to ever falter because she'll run the other way. And I would say that that's a fundamental flaw within the woman, because it's saying, I feel so unsafe within myself that if you don't provide all of my safety, I gotta get out of here. So like, I do think one of the main roles for men is like presence, purpose, protection, providing, right? All of those P's. But you're not going to be perfect, and you're going to get sick, and you're going to get old, and there's going to be hardship, and you should be able to be human. And I like can come in with that nurturing and like be that harbor for you and not be so scared and have to run away. So it's all a balance, and everyone has to kind of work on themselves, but it's also how do you show up to support the other person at the highest level.
That's the beauty of the feminine, right? Like being able to create harmony and peace and love. Like, he loves when I make him food. You know, when I get to like, when I take care of him in my ways, like he loves it so much. Like the joy in his face, you know, he's so excited when I do these things.
You bring me a glass of water when I'm working. I'm like, oh, my wife brought me a glass of water.
And I feel the same way, right? So when I get to be in my feminine, I get to bring in softness. I get to be playful with him. I get to tease him, flirt with him, touch him. I like to look at my role as bringing harmony. Like I love making our home beautiful and clean, and setting things up, like snacks for the kids and dinner, and like, I don't know, like just making everybody just kind of feel like they're home, like our house is our home, right? And that's how I get to take. That's one of the ways I get to take care of him. It's a give and a take, and I think when you're in a healthy place, there's a joy in the giving as much as there is in the receiving, you know, and that's that nice healthy balance of masculine and feminine is, it's a beautiful thing to be able to provide, you know?
Yeah. And that's when you know that the relationship is in a good spot. It's like you are happy to help. You're happy to give. Like their happiness is your happiness. And it's not
exciting.
It's not a chore, something you have to do. You're not obligated. You're like, no, I get to do this. This is amazing.
Even the sex stuff. Like even like, you know, when we're not the sex stuff, like what I mean, like when I'm not necessarily in the mood, you know, there's still things I can do to make him happy, and I'm happy to do it. Oh, for sure. You know what I mean? Like even though I don't necessarily like need to get into my pleasure, but I'm like, I get to please you. That feels good too, you know?
Yeah. So, act of service.
Yeah.
We love acts of service.
Everyone's favorite love language. So the last thing I wanted to get into was like, what do you wish more men knew about women, and what do you wish more women knew about men?
I wish that men could really get it through their heads, like really believe us when we say that we are so different. You know, when men will say, oh, this is BS. She needs to grow up. She needs to be an adult. She needs to do this. It's like, we are adults, but we're female adults. We're not male. Like we're never going to communicate like you. Maybe in an office setting, you know, when we're in our masculine, because we have to be, and we're in that situation that we can kind of put on our man hats and do that, you know. But when we're in our space of comfort in an intimate relationship, like we don't want to be men. I don't think you want us to be men either. And that means that if you want the feminine, you want a woman, you have to ride the waves with her, or at least let her ride her waves. Be the lighthouse in her ocean of emotions and of feelings. We are not you. We're truly different. We don't speak the same language.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd kind of say basically the same thing, but the inverse. and I think this is the number one thing that's causing damage in relationships today is that we don't understand that men and women play different roles in relationships. And I'm not saying to go back to the 1950s because I don't think anybody wants to do that. I definitely don't want that for me or for Whitney, but there's a reason why over many, many tens of thousands of generations, we've evolved certain different roles. And if you try to throw that all out and design it from scratch or pretend it doesn't exist, like you're in for a very rocky road in a relationship. It's important that men understand like that they can bring certain things to the table that are a gift to her. Like if you can bring emotional stability when she's not feeling emotionally stable, that's a gift. If you can be capable of anger and protective violence, but never direct that towards her in any way, that's a gift. And we have certain things that as men only we can really fully bring to the relationship if you're a masculine man and a feminine woman. And expecting her to behave like a man, to take accountability in the same way as a man, to be explicit like a man, it might feel good to leave that on a comment on an Instagram video because you're like, yeah, fuck all women, like they're immature. You're not recognizing that who you are as a man is a gift to women, and you can give them something that they don't have in exactly the same way that you do. And if you do a good job of that, they're going to give you back things that you don't have. But if you're waiting for them to act like men and you still want her to be feminine, it's like, good luck, I guess. That doesn't really work. If you want a man to act exactly like a woman, but then be really feminine, it's like, no wonder you are bitter and leaving angry comments all the time.
What do you want women to know about men?
What do I want women to know? Was that the question?
Mm-hmm. No, but that was fantastic.
Complete missed the mark on that one.
Very
what
helpful.
I want women to know about men.
Yeah.
You cannot be too obvious when you're communicating with a man.
That's good.
Like no matter how obvious you think you've made it, I promise you he's only halfway there at most. Right? So like if you think that by saying, whatever, I need more help around the house, he actually knows what you mean. Like he doesn't, right? If you think it's like, oh, it's nice that Bill and Susie go for dates all the time. He doesn't think that means he should take you on more dates. He thinks, you think it's nice that Bill and Susie go on dates. Like that's all he thinks.
Yeah.
So if you want something from him, just tell him, give him really clear instructions, say this is what you need. And then if he thinks it's a dumb idea, he'll be like, that's dumb. And if he thinks it's doable, he'll say, yeah, of course, no problem. Like we are like sled dogs. Like we like having something to pull. And like, if you tell us exactly what it is, we'll be like thrilled to do that for you. And we will do that for you for the rest of our lives with only a very small requirement of like appreciation and respect when we're doing those things. Mm-hmm. And men want to serve women. We really do. We don't want to be employees for them. We don't want to be treated like employees, but if we can, from a position of like feeling appreciation and respect, like do all these things for you that make you happy, that makes us really, really happy to do that. So just like say exactly what you want us to hear because we don't get it.
Mm-hmm. This is so much fun. We have to do this again next time that I'm back. But before we wrap up, do you want to tell the listeners how they can support you, where they can find your work, sign up for your course, all that good stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So we have we work mostly with men whose relationships are in some state of disrepair. She's leaving. She's thinking of leaving. She's already left. And we have coursework. We have a bunch of amazing coaches. We have an amazing community, and we only teach stuff that has worked for me, that works for other men. There's no theoretical stuff. It's not talking about your feelings all day. It's like, this is what your situation is. This is what to do. And it's very sequential and it's very, very effective. And we only really work with committed men. So men who actually want to make the relationship work. If you're not sure, there's lots of other resources out there for you. Go explore them. If you are definitely committed to making this work and seeing if it can work, we would love to work with you. And at @the_sovereign_man on Instagram.
And we will link all of that below. Before you sign off, if you can leave us a 5-star review, make sure you hit like and subscribe. Check the sponsors and affiliates underneath this video. I use or have used everything that I'm pushing towards you guys. You will love it. And we will see you next episode. Bye, everybody.